Okay, guys, I'm back. If you were live, sorry about that. Facebook was not liking me, but I am here. I'm super, super, super excited to be talking about today's topic. It's mindset, but it's a very specific way to look at mindset and way to approach mindset. And it's something that I find myself doing, talking about, looking for, paying attention to on the daily, as the kids say. And I wanted to share it with you because it's also something that I think sometimes there's of course, I'm a coach. I'm always going to be valuing coaching, and I have my own coach. And I think it's really important to have somebody be able to see the stuff that you can't see. But this is something that once you are aware of it, you can't not see it. Once you're aware of it, you might not notice it all the time, but it's something that you can self-coach around. It's something that you can make a practice to pay attention to, because as the topic or title of today's live stream says, this is a mindset shift that you can make. And I would argue even it's not even a mindset shift. It's a practice you can create for yourself that will make all of your other mindset work more powerful. And the reverse is also true. When we use this mindset, this sort of way of looking at ourselves and our mindset, I'm going to tell you what it is in a minute. It actually slows down our progress in moving forward, moving out of a limiting belief, moving out of an unhealthy mindset or out of a mindset that does not serve us anymore. And it actually slows us down. And so again, today is about making your mindset work more powerful. And this is one of the simplest, most straightforward ways to do it. And I think if you're a coach or a healer, this is something that you probably already help your clients with, but it's a great thing to just kind of like keep in your awareness as you're helping people through things. But it's also the kind of thing that, most of us, no matter what you do for a living, most of us naturally will do this for for our friends and loved ones, and we'll notice it in them. And so giving yourself a chance to notice it in yourself is just so valuable. So I want to share it today. Okay. So again, today's topic is the mindset shift that, and as I said, it's almost a practice, but the mindset shift that will make all your other mindset work more powerful is releasing self-judgment. Releasing self-judgment. And there's lots of different ways to look at self-judgment. And in this example, I don't actually mean, it would help with regular self-judgment, but this is a specific kind of self-judgment. This is when and I have this happen so often in so many of my client calls, because this is just normal human nature. I do it to myself as well. So often when we're doing mindset work, right? And we are working through something and working to identify with a coach, on your own, with your friend, whatever, you're looking at sort of the ways in which you are looking at something, right? That's a big piece of mindset work, is looking at your perspective on something, or looking at the thoughts you're having about something and zooming out and saying, oh, okay, so maybe my perspective on this is flawed. Maybe my perspective on this is not true. Maybe I am using a limiting belief to create my version of what I think is the truth of this situation. And once you start to realize that that may not be true, and I'm approaching something from the space of fear, or I'm approaching something from the space of whatever, you start to kind of get a clue, you start to gain that awareness around what's happening in your mindset, right? Awareness is first. You can't change it if you don't know what is going on, right? Awareness is first. You can't heal something if you don't know what the source of the problem is, right? If you're healing, and that's where I think a lot of us get tripped up in mindset work, is we'll heal something at a certain layer, and not that that's wrong. That's actually a huge, important part of the process, but we'll heal something based on what is actually a symptom versus not, instead of healing something at the source. And sometimes the only way to get to the source is to keep healing those symptoms, to keep healing those layers that are sitting on top of the ultimate source or reason or sort of worldview that you might have that affects a lot of your thought patterns, that affects a lot of behaviors, that affects the way that you run your business, right? The way that you work with your clients, all the things. So as we are doing mindset work and we are starting to become aware, that's the first step in mindset work, is becoming aware of our thoughts, becoming aware of how our mindset is working or not working for us, how our brains are playing tricks on ourselves. When you start to shift into that space of awareness and go, oh, I see what I'm doing, right? Oh, I see what I'm thinking. I see how I'm approaching this. I see why now, the true why of what's happening. Once you hit that piece of awareness, the brain is a funny place. And let me just be really clear. I don't want to judge you for self-judgment, right? But we like to judge ourselves. It's maybe we don't like it, but we are really natural and quick to judge ourselves for once we have that awareness, right? So, oh, I see, we talked about pricing last week. I see that I've been approaching my pricing from, oh my God, was that 2 weeks ago? I've been approaching my pricing from a space of lack and a space of unworthiness because I wasn't recognizing the value that I bring to my clients and the value that I bring in my work. And I was underpricing my work because I was coming from a space of lack in my worthiness and in the value that I bring, or I was coming from a space of lack and thinking that I need to make my pricing affordable for all those people out there so that I'm accessible, so that they can all afford me. And the truth is, I can't work with everybody on the planet. And I'm, whoever I'm targeting, I'm now getting into so many hypotheticals, but whoever I'm targeting, maybe they do have money to support me and I'm like giving them a discount because I'm acting like they're needy and they're not, right? So, right. Once we get to that place of going, okay, now I see why I'm approaching my pricing that way. So often what we do is you say, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. Self-judgment, self-blame. Oh my God, I can't believe I did that. I can't believe, that I was seeing it this way. And I can't believe that I'm even doing this right now. Right. So it's like, and I know I hear too from a lot of my clients, I work with a good number of coaches, healers, helpers, people who do, coach people or help people around mindset. And they will be like, but I know this shit. I know this. I helped a client with this yesterday, right? Like, what is wrong with me that I couldn't see it? What is wrong with me that I missed this? Another one that I hear a lot is another way in which we like to blame ourselves is like, I've been freaking working on this for so long. I thought I healed this already. That's one I hear so often. And what I know to be true about learning things in life and mindset work and psychology and the way that we grow and evolve over time is that so often the way that we learn and grow over time often is around the same topics. And I say topics because you can have multiple limiting beliefs that you work through over the years that might ultimately come down to lack or scarcity, right? That might ultimately, if you just boil it all down in a topics, might ultimately come down to, or boil down to self-love, might ultimately boil down to worthiness, might ultimately boil down to feeling supported, right? So all of these things, whatever it is, you may 100%, you are a flipping human, and you are going to have lessons and learning and growth areas and growth spurts and growth experiences around many of the same topics. And because, as I was talking earlier, when you are looking to heal something, you oftentimes have to heal it at the more, I'm going to just call it superficial level. I don't mean superficial like superficiality or materialism or anything like that, but superficial, like if you're looking at like the layers of your skin, that top layer, oftentimes we have to heal or look at or change our awareness around something smaller, something higher level in the surface level before we get deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into the depths of our psyche, right? And so you're going to keep having the same lessons over and over at deeper levels, right? You're going to have different opportunities to practice. If you're working on setting boundaries, holy hell, you're going to get so many opportunities to set boundaries because that's what you're working on. And you're going to start to attract to yourself, for very good reason, opportunities to practice, opportunities to shore that up, opportunities to go, ooh, I got it this time. Or, ooh, okay, I thought I had it. I've been setting really good boundaries for a year. And now I'm being called to set a boundary at a whole nother level, which then means I have to go back in and see what's left around this topic, what's left around this idea, what's left around this mindset that I'm good at setting these kinds of boundaries. I've practiced it. I've gotten it. I got it. But it doesn't mean you've like checked it off, because life doesn't work that way. Now I'm going to learn how to set boundaries at a deeper level. So all this is to say, those of you who want to throw the self-judgment card out on yourself because you should have known better, or holy shit, I've been working on this topic, this issue for my whole life, and here it is again. What's wrong with me? So the first part of this conversation, I really want to talk about how this, well, actually, most of this conversation is more about how it shows up, because when you can identify that you're doing this, you can stop it. Or you can just catch the thought, right? Again, it's so, and this is where like, so I was going to share this later. I'm going to share this now. So there's a story. I've talked about this before, but it's been a while. If you've ever heard of the phrase, the second arrow, it's some sort of like Buddhist parable, but essentially there's this concept that when you have something happens that causes you pain, right? So that could be something external. Oftentimes it's our reaction to that pain, right? It could just be a mindset thing, whatever it is that you're upset about, whatever it is that you're struggling with from a mindset perspective. That's the first arrow, right? So it's as if, I don't really love this vision, but it's as if you've been struck by an arrow. But then the Buddhist parable comes back and says, and when you judge yourself for it, in fact, I think that they come back into and they say suffering, it's sort of like suffering is optional is the second arrow. But I think with mindset work, the first arrow is, okay, I have a thing with scarcity. Okay, I have a thing with this mindset around worthiness that affects my pricing. When we also judge, when we judge ourselves for that, then we've just added a second layer. We've just added a second arrow, right? So now we've got two arrows in our body that we have to deal with instead of one. So what does that mean? It makes it worse, right? And so it's like, okay, I have this mindset around scarcity. Then it's like, shit, I really shouldn't have this because I've been working on this for a really, really, really long time. And then my favorite, which I've done too, is you want a third arrow? I'm a coach and I'm a healer and I help people, or I'm a psychologist, I'm a therapist, and I help people with this all the time. And I see it all the time in other people. Why can't I effing see it in myself? Right? It's two layers of self-blame, self-judgment. So this is like this is going to be one of my, like essentially what I'm saying with this, if you only hear me for 5 seconds, is that when you're doing mindset work, be very compassionate with yourself. Because the first thing that we rush to do is to judge ourselves for having the issue in the first place. And you're human, so it happens. When you can let that go, you can then get back to the heart of the matter. You can then more efficiently do your mindset work. And so when we want to judge ourselves, which maybe that's one of your first arrows. Maybe that's one of your mindset issues in general. But then when you judge yourself for judging yourself, right? You're just adding that second layer. You're adding, what is the phrase? Like pain to injury. You're just making it harder on yourself. And this is, I know, a very logical way of approaching it, but I am kind of trying to present a business case to that part of you. Because you may know when you hear me like, yeah, okay, Laura, I get it. I don't need to hear you talk about this for 45 minutes because I already get it. But the other part of you that wants to rush to self-judgment, might need a little bit of support. So I'm trying to give it a business case for why this is not a good idea. And it's also not to say, let's judge ourselves. Like that it's so easy to say, okay, we'll just stop feeling that way. Right. Like, have you ever been in love with somebody that didn't want to be with you, or that was already over you, or whatever? And you just, okay, we know the solution to that is to just get over the person and move on. Well, that's a lot easier said than done. Right. So I'm not trying to say like, okay, just the answer is stop judging yourself. Magically, just, do that. What I'm trying to say is we do this because we're human. It's very normal and natural. And when you are working on your mindset, when you're looking within, when you are doing this work with yourself, if you notice a specific topic and you're working, I don't love the idea of working, but you're working to heal it, to shift it, to make give yourself some relief around it. Oftentimes I find that we can get really, really stuck because we're like, okay, yeah, so I found this thing and I don't know what to do about it. So again, step one is awareness, but sometimes your step one or your like sub step 1A can be, how can I be really asking yourself, how can I be really loving and gentle and tender and compassionate with myself, simply around the fact that I have this issue, or that I have this mindset, or that I'm aware now that this doesn't serve me. I often like to really appreciate and celebrate my clients when they find a new awareness like this. And it's really, really hard, I think. And I think, you have to find the right moment, because the truth is, like, me looking from within, if you can zoom out of like what it's like to go on a mindset journey around any topic, is that once you have the awareness, oh my God, like it's like you're solving the right problem in your business, right? You're solving the right quote problem in your mindset. And you're looking at the truth of the situation, which just means that you can move forward from it. You can create a new mindset. You can start moving forward. And so it's a huge celebration, because a lot of times it takes time to find that, oh, this is the mindset I have and it's not serving me anymore. Oh, this is what's happening. And so sometimes I like to recommend to people that they give themselves, grace, space, and appreciation for finding it. Because once you find it, then you can do something about it. But that's not always easy to do in the moment, because we rush to self-judgment, because we want to understand why the F we have this problem and what's wrong with us, right? And I find that both actions are helpful, but it depends on where you are in the moment as to which one is actually realistic. And when you can say, okay, I have this mindset issue, I don't know what to do about it, I'm really sort of bummed about it, or I'm like feeling it. One thing that you can do that I find really helps is just removing the self-judgment, or just taking the awareness to that next level of, yeah, and I'm also kind of beating myself up about this. So how can I just love myself a little bit more? How can I just be a little bit softer with myself? Because actually, like, you know, they say like the only way over something is through it. Like, that's a step towards the through. That's a step in the right direction. It's a positive step. It's a self-affirming, self-loving step. It's actually more efficient. And sometimes we can't work on the mindset because we're judging ourselves. It's almost like that then becomes an added layer. And sometimes we judge ourselves. It's like, this is like the way our brain likes to play tricks on us. Sometimes we judge ourselves because the brain kind of, I feel that I should do a whole, okay, I'm going to make a note here. I think I'm going to do a whole live on the saboteur. The self-sabotage. Saboteur is one of the archetypes. But anyway, the brain is not wired. The brain is wired to keep us safe, and it's very caveman, right? And so, you know, it's protecting you from tigers and death and starvation and storms or something, right? It's not focused on the more modern things, and neither is the subconscious mind, frankly. And so it wants to keep you safe. And when it feels that you're stepping out of your comfort zone, like recognizing a mindset issue for what it is and finding that step one awareness around, oh my God, this is how I've been approaching my life, or I didn't realize this was I always like to talk about it as a worldview. I didn't realize this was my worldview. Then automatically in your body somewhere, there's almost like this message of we're not safe, we're not safe, we're not safe, because you're like, holy crap, the thought upon which I built this business practice, or the thought upon which I created this part of my life is flawed, right? It can shake your bones. And I know a lot of people right now are going through a lot of mindset work. And so mindset shifts, I should say, and transformation. And so what your brain likes to do is to, like, it's counterintuitive, but it also makes perfect sense. Like, it likes to keep you from making progress on that mindset thing because it is wrong, but it thinks that's going to keep you safe. Because it doesn't want you to feel mental and emotional pain. It doesn't want you, even if that's the way to relief, even if that's the way to freedom, even if that's the way to peace and joy, it doesn't want you to go through the hard stuff, and it doesn't rationally know what's going on. And so it self-sabotages by, well, we better judge ourselves for it, right? Then we can't actually look at the real issue, at the real source, because we need to just like get mad at ourselves and yell at ourselves and be upset at ourselves because we have this issue. Or like I said, there's some sneakier ways that self-judgment comes in too, specifically for people who do this work all the time. You know, oh my God, I'm a coach. I work with people on this exact issue. Why couldn't I see it? What's wrong with me? And now you're not only judging your mindset, but now you're judging like your ability to do your profession, right? So, and I laugh because I've done it, and I've laughed because like so many of my clients do it, and it's so fine. But where can you just come back to a space of being loving, being gentle and compassionate with yourself, which I think is a really great approach to mindset work in general. But that sneaky self-judgment will come in, and it's just going to slow you down. It's just going to keep you in that space of holy shit, as opposed to moving you more into that space of, okay, let me feel into why I'm doing this. Let me feel into what's happening here so that I can move through it and start to create a new thought process. The other way that I like to look at this in terms of being really gentle and compassionate with yourself, whatever, depends on who you are. If you like children, if you have children in your life, I always think about my niece and nephew. I don't have children, but I always think about my niece and nephew around this. But you could also do it around around a client. You could think about it from the perspective of a client. You can think about it from the perspective of a pet. But the idea being, if you were to treat your best friend, that's another one. If you were to treat yourself, if you were to be speaking not to yourself about this issue, but to your best friend about it, or to your life partner, or to your current partner, or to your, what did I say? Children, or children that are in your life, or pets. If you were to be speaking to somebody that you deeply loved about this, and they had this mindset thing that they were dealing with, how would you approach it with them? Right? We're so much better at treating the people we love really, really good. Right? So it's like, how can you, because I always think about back when my niece and nephew were younger, like that 3-year-old, 4-year-old that you can have a conversation with. They might not understand everything, but you can really sit and have a conversation, but you can also love on them and hug them and tell them, and it's okay. And there's nothing wrong with you, sweetheart. And right, that's the vibe that we want to take when we're approaching our work with our mindset. And so how can you do that for yourself? Right. And if you need help, go to dinner with your best friend, call your best friend on the phone. Mine doesn't live with me, near me. Call them and say, okay, talk to me about this. The first thing they're going to say is, cut yourself a break. Of course you felt that way. Of course that happened. This makes perfect sense, but it's okay. And now you can move through. Like, they're going to say the nice, sweet, precious things that you're maybe not saying to yourself. So that's the, how do you get out of this part of this conversation? But again, it's just all about being more loving with yourself. And sometimes that's like, comes in the form of giving yourself a walk, giving yourself a spa day, giving yourself a nice bath before bed, or a chance to veg in front of the TV, or a shopping day, whatever, or an ice cream treat, like whatever it is that is a treat for you. Sometimes it can just be giving yourself that self-compassion around this particular thing. So I invite you to think through, where are you judging yourself in the middle of your mindset work? And where can you soften? Where can you be more gentle? I also want to share a little bit of like I was talking earlier, like a business case for why this can be really helpful. I have been acquainted with Abraham Hicks' emotional scale for some time, and I just recently found a very interesting variation that I want to share with you. So if you're not familiar with Abraham Hicks, just very, very briefly, check them out. It's good vibes. But they talk about a emotional scale where I think it's enlightenment, joy, peace are at the top, and things like guilt and shame and depression are at the bottom. And it's just this idea that it's not even an idea, I believe it to be truth, that our thoughts create things, right? And that our feelings and our energy create vibrations in the universe that then allow us to attract what it is that we are feeling. And so if you're, God, I don't know how to oversimplify this. I'm just going to leave that there. There's a whole piece around abundance and attraction with that. But what's really important around that is that when I'm going to come back more into psychology instead of spirituality, because I think it's easier. I can't explain Abraham Hicks in a few minutes. And the point is, what they do is they put all of the key big emotions that we experience in our lives, and they put them on a scale in order of, like, let's just call it heaviest to lightest, right? And what they talk about, Abraham Hicks does a great description of how, like, depression is below anger. And so if you're experiencing anger, there's a lot of value. You don't want to always be in anger, but there's a lot of value in being in anger, especially because it keeps you from being depressed, right? So I don't know if any of you have ever gone through a grief process, but that's always, my phone is ringing. That's a really important part of the grief process, is to be angry. And part of why Abraham Hicks would describe it as is because you've moved. It's actually a beautiful movement from depression, and it's not linear, but from depression into anger, which just means there's more, right? Think about it. Like depression is like almost, it's not apathy, but it's like very low energy. But anger is a lot higher energy, which just means you can process through your emotions. You can get some of it out. Some of it's not productive, but I find that so oftentimes when we can let anger be productive, we've got to let ourselves be angry. It just helps us move, quote unquote, up the emotional scale, which just means it helps us move towards a feeling of peace and happiness, which I think is what really all humans are striving for, whether it's in your business or in your life or both, right? And so as we look at our emotions, and again, looking at those emotions next to each other is a really helpful thing with the emotional scale. So if you're not familiar with it, I think it's very helpful because it helps you kind of understand where you are. And instead of, I've talked about this recently, I think on a live, instead of like, hey, I see that you're in an emotional crisis and you're about to have a panic attack. Why don't we sit down and meditate, right? It's like people are down here and you're telling them to be here. Like we can't move from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds, right? And so not expecting yourself to emotionally also supports you in your mindset work and saying, okay, I'm really angry right now. Okay, let me check the emotional scale and see what's like 1 or 2 steps above anger. And let's see what I can do in the next hour or day or week to just help myself. You got to do it authentically. You can't force it. But maybe I could, pay attention to how I can move up the emotional scale. Pick a different thought, they'd say. So when you look at that, what I found, so I just find that very, very helpful. But what I found recently is a book by David R. Hawking, and it's called Letting Go. I'm only about a quarter of the way through the book, so I don't know yet if I recommend it, but I like it so far. And he has a very similar emotional scale. I think he calls it the scale of emotions. But what's different about his, and there's a lot of similarities, but what's different about his scale is that shame is on the bottom. Shame in his model is the lowest part of the scale, which means it's the lowest vibrating energy on the scale. And I love Brené Brown, who has done a ton of work around shame, research around shame. She talks about it a lot. And I wrote down her definition of shame, which is this feeling that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. A feeling that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. And so when you take David R. Hawkins and you take Brené Brown stuff and you put them together, what in this context of what we're talking about, what I find is no wonder this idea, this concept of judging ourselves that I've seen for years and years and years, no wonder it gets in the way. No wonder it's the second layer or the second arrow. No wonder it does not support our mindset work, because I think that self-judgment really has a lot of shame to it. I don't want to mince words. I don't want to pick apart definitions, but just sitting with the vibe of self-judgment and shame, they are very, very similar and they can include one another. They also, I think, could be separate. But I think we often have a lot of shame around the things that we judge ourselves for. I think judgment can be a little bit lighter personally, but not always. And so if you have an element of shame, the lowest level vibration around just getting started in your place with this mindset piece that you want to address, can you see how no wonder it doesn't help? And no wonder a lot of people, no wonder a lot of people don't want to go work with a therapist or a coach. No wonder a lot of people don't want to look within and find what's going on in there, because they probably feel shame about it. And who wants to feel like that? It's on the fucking bottom end of the scale of emotions, right? And so when we can look that in the eye and allow ourselves to move up so the point is, it can allow you to move up the scale fairly quickly when you can realize, oh, wait a minute, hold on a second. I'm judging myself for this. I'm shaming myself for this. I know that I'm a human. I know that I'm going to have mindset issues. I know that in fact, this is a small win, small celebration, which is the only way you get to the big celebrations and the big wins. And I think the small wins are maybe even more important. I know that this is one step in my direction of healing this thing because I've become aware of it. And so I'm going to let myself off the hook. I'm going to be gentle with myself. I'm going to let go. I'm going to move in the direction of curiosity around myself as opposed to judging myself for this topic, right? So that's the one piece that I really, really just, I've talked about this for many years. I've worked with my clients around this for many years. And this like really new concept that's new for me, this new concept of David Hawkins' scale, where he talks about shame being the lower level emotion. And no wonder Brene Brown has spent so much of her life's work on it, but it really does make sense. Everything else, it just sort of drives home the final point, like nail in the coffin, for lack of a better word. Like for me, this is like the no wonder. We've had business cases. I've studied this in psychology. I've studied this millions of times. This is a real thing and a real phenomenon. And you can look it up. But this was just another layer of like, oh my God, no wonder, because it just sends you right back down to the bottom. So I wanted to share this with you because I think it's a beautiful business case of this idea of how to do mindset work in a way that's actually helpful, that makes people feel good about it. And then I like to go into a space of curiosity. I had a graduate school professor that once taught us this concept. He always used to say this. Oh, isn't that interesting? Aren't I an interesting person? Isn't it fascinating that I thought that I was unworthy of working with a brand new client? Or isn't that interesting that I thought that my pricing was appropriate when in fact I was just shooting myself in the foot and creating scarcity for myself and my clients, right? Whatever it is, aren't I interesting? He used to say, which really, again, feel free to steal it. It really helps you move from that space of shame and self-judgment around this topic to curiosity, which I don't know where curiosity is on the scale, but I guarantee you it's up, right? Oh, isn't it interesting? I wonder why I think that. Was it my mom? Was it my dad? Was it my high school? Was it my culture? Was it some experience I had when I was 17? Was it my first job out of college? I wonder why I thought that I had to work so hard for my work, whatever it is, right? So moving into a space of curiosity, approaching your mindset work with compassion, with love, with levity and laughter, not to make fun of yourself, but to just, I think sometimes the human experience can just be so hilarious, and being able to laugh at the situation really does also, by the way, help move energy and help you shift into another space. But the key, again, going back to what I titled this today, this is going to make all your mindset work more powerful. Whatever topic you're looking at for the rest of your life, when you can let go of that second arrow, when you can let go of that self-judgment, when you can take a moment with where you are and appreciate you for who you are and approach yourself with compassion, then you take that self-judgment off and you just get to focus more directly on that actual topic at hand without all these layers on top of it, without this fluff and mess. You're just looking at the real deal, which just means you can more effectively and more efficiently and more quickly and more honestly, it's so much easier. Like yes, it doesn't feel great to look deep at it, but once you do, the resistance starts to release. Once you do, everything starts to feel better and you can start to climb up the emotional scale, but you can also start to formulate a new thought process in its place. And it's just going to make you feel better. And so that's my trick. That's my key to making your mindset work more powerful, is really getting and looking at the source and only the source, looking at the topic and only the topic, stripping away those, surface level issues, stripping away the self-sabotage, stripping away the self-judgment is the main topic for today, gets you to really look at the thing, which just makes your work more powerful because you're in it and you're just doing it without bullshit. And then you get to go forth. And oftentimes what I find when I do this work in this way, looking at the actual source, is that you find other things attached to it that you didn't know were attached to. So again, that's also why it makes your mindset work more powerful, because if you're looking at something like chronic busyness, if you're looking at something like overwhelm with your work, right? I work a lot of times with my clients around like finding a comfortable pace for work. If you're looking at a way to make it easier to make more money, to scale your income, to scale your business, to be more efficient with your time, but create a bigger impact. When we're looking at some of those things, we start to realize that there are other things attached to it, and we can sort of heal all of that at once, which also just makes your mindset work more powerful. So I hope this is helpful. Let me know if you have any questions. I know I've spoken on this topic before, but I don't think I've ever dedicated an entire full live to this topic. And I just felt that it was actually that important. And I also felt that, I've talked about this in some ways around just noticing the self-judgment and noticing when you're going there and that it's the second arrow. But I really wanted to create the business case for that part of you that wants to judge yourself. And I really wanted to give you a couple of tips around how to then move out of that space of judgment, how to then look at your mindset work from a deeper perspective. And that's how the mindset, you get a bigger bang for your buck for what you're doing, because you start to hit multiple layers at once. You start to hit multiple topics at once because you're dealing with the real deal. And that's really, I think that's really, if you're looking for a coach, I think that is one of the things that I really do well, whether you're looking at something in your business that's very, very practical or more on a strategy level, or whether it's looking at your mindset. So much of what I do is how do we boil it all down and simplify it for a second, look at it, and then make changes efficiently and sometimes slowly, but make changes that affect everything, which just naturally happens. It's going to affect your relationship with your partner. It's going to affect the way that you interact with potential clients. It's going to affect the way that you scale your income. Because the way that we do one thing is the way that we do many things. And it's like boiling that down and then going, great, that's where the strategy needs to be. That's where the mindset needs to be. That's where how we need to adjust your team or how we want to adjust your calendar. It all kind of comes from some of the same basic principles or same basic mindset shifts that you're going to make around moving your business into the direction that you want it to go in next. So I love working on this stuff with my people. So I do have a couple of slots open. If you're interested in coaching with me, I will put the link here in the comments. Congratulations to Glenda. She won our free session. 2 weeks ago, she won our free session, or a week ago, she won our free session that I offered as a part of the pricing workshop. Just a little announcement around the pricing workshop. So that will be available for free here in the group for the rest of the month. And then we're going to move on to this month's workshop is called Creating Spaciousness in Your Calendar. Just like everything, we're going to be looking at the very practical elements of creating your calendar. This is not about time blocking. This is about looking at your values and the way that you spend time, looking at the way that your business needs to be set up and the way that you want to spend your time at work versus at home, and creating a calendar that really works for you and a schedule that works for you, which is, for me, it's about creating spaciousness so that you have space for everything without cramming everything in. It's also about saying no. And we're going to talk about both the practical and the strategy and the mindset around what happens in your calendar. I talked about pricing last month, and I talked about how I think there are some certain business topics pricing being one of them, the way you manage your calendar being another, that can really, when I start working with my clients, it can really give me insights into what's happening in their mindset, because it just oftentimes will be reflective in some simple things like your calendar, like the way your team is structured, all kinds of things. And so what I'm hoping to do with this workshop, what I intend to do with this workshop, is to give you guys it's free, by the way. It'll just be here in the group the last week of the month. It's the 28th, 29th, and 30th. And I don't even have my graphics ready for it yet, but that will come out here very shortly. I think next week we'll start announcing it, and I'll create a group. I'll create an event inside the group. So you don't need to do anything to sign up. If you're just a member of this group, join me. It'll be super fun, creating spaciousness in your calendar. And I think that's all. I will be doing workshops at the end of the month now for a little while. I've been playing around with what I want to do with these end of the month events. And right now I'm feeling really inspired. If you haven't noticed, just for all of you who think about how you put your content out, I've noticed that there were some topics that I just couldn't cram into a weekly live. I couldn't cram into live plus a full week of themed content. I just felt that as I started to put some of this content together last month for the workshop and this month too, that this topic really warranted a lot more conversation and a lot more time. And so it's going to be last month and this month were 3-day workshops. We'll see what the next one becomes. It'll just be driven by the content, but I'm having a lot of fun. I hope that you guys are, and have a great week. I will be back on the island next week. So I will join you from I'll probably be sweating on my next live because it's going to be super hot down there. But I'm excited to get back home and see all my people there. All right, guys, have a lovely week. I can't wait to see you next week. Talk soon.